since the start of this war, I know this may be a very sort of simplistic question, but since the start of Putin's invasion over 2 years ago, what has been the most important weapon system within the Ukrainian arsenal? What has given Putin's military the most difficulty?
That would probably be the HIMARS rocket system. This system has given Putin an incredible amount of agita. With this system, Ukraine is able to fire up to 6 missiles. These missiles are guided via GPS toward a target. They can fire at separate targets, and then they can move almost within about 2-3 minutes of firing. They can go to another place where there's already a pod of missiles set up, drop the other pod, drop the pod that was just fired, load the new pod in, and shoot again. It has been an incredible weapon system, and it has proven the concept of HIMARS, and by extension, the tracked version, which is the multiple launch rocket system.
For the HIMARS, what is the range on that?
I believe the range of the, I think it was the M61 that we gave them. I want to say that's about 60 or so miles, roughly. They have different versions. We actually gave them a version that can't go as far as our most modern HIMARS missiles, and that was done because we didn't want them shooting into Russia. However, of course, that might change since we've allowed Russia to use ATACMS missiles, which is another feature. The HIMARS launcher can take one of those HIMARS pods, drop that off, and load an ATACMS pod, and that gives them an incredible amount of range with either a unitary warhead, meaning one single big warhead, or a cluster munition warhead, which is great for things like radar or airfields or other kinds of soft targets like troops.
Okay. How would you describe the logistics, in terms of efficiency, in terms of delivery of weapons to the Ukrainian military? Really, again, going back to the beginning of the invasion, I know there's a lot there on the playing field to talk about, but I'm curious to get your perception about how the U.S. and how the EU, how NATO has done in terms of supplying Ukraine with what they need in a timely fashion.
So we started out pretty good, being able to give Ukraine whatever they wanted for the most part. Javelin missiles, the Javelin essentially helped save Ukraine. Russians, they invaded in through Belarus. They slammed right into the Javelin missile, which is a smart weapon that once that soldier puts that crosshair on that tank, that thing fires and it goes and hits that tank. It doesn't care how small you are. It doesn't care if you fire off smoke. Doesn't care if you try to hide. That missile will go after you. So from a logistics standpoint, we did great. And then during this summer, or last summer, I should say, we had a lull because there were some problems in Congress. And eventually, the right side prevailed, and we managed to convince Congress that not only is this good for Ukraine, this is good for the United States. Missiles expire. Whenever we fire a Patriot, we're actually firing Patriots that are near the end of their service life because the fuel inside those missiles will actually expire. We have to send it back to Raytheon, and they have to cut it open and demill it, and it's hazardous waste. Well, now we can just send those things over to Ukraine. Ukraine can fire those older Patriot missiles, those older HIMARS rockets. We're saved on the disposal cost, and we get to use our money to purchase new weapons, which we were going to do anyway. So this is actually a win for everybody except the Russians, which is the whole idea.
Now, that's a really interesting point when you talk about sort of aging out of material. We've talked about on the PDB, we've talked about how Putin is trying to restock his warehouses with munitions. And obviously, North Korea has been playing a role in that. Could you talk a little bit about the reliability, the dependability of munitions coming from North Korea? What have we been seeing on the battlefield in terms of what they've been providing to Putin?
So I've actually taken a look at this. Russian soldiers have cut open some of the shell casings, at least for the 122 millimeter howitzers, and the explosives are not packed correctly. They're supposed to be in very tight bundles. That way they all explode uniformly, which gives that good gas pressure to push that shell outside the barrel. However, what we're seeing from some of the munitions coming from North Korea is you have stuff that's packed incorrectly. You have explosive charges in those shells that are missing a couple of strands of explosive, and that could do a couple of things. The first thing that could do is it could blow up your barrel, and that would be bad. Now, the second thing that could do is when you fire.
Okay, just for if I could interrupt, just for our listeners, then blowing up the barrel, that's considered bad. I just wanted to. I wanted to make sure our listeners caught that. Okay.
That would be bad. That would be a suboptimal outcome for shooting a piece of artillery. It's supposed to explode on the other end. Now, when it comes to a second problem, is you could have what's called a short round. And if you've ever been in the military, the term short round, it is absolutely terrifying. That is when someone didn't put enough propellant inside the breech of a weapon system or of an artillery system before they fired it. So you might have 6 rounds going to one place correctly where they're supposed to go, and 1 round falling a little bit short, and it could fall on your own soldiers. So some of these systems some of the ammunition, I should say, that's coming from North Korea isn't packed correctly, and it's short the amount of propellant it needs to actually get those shells to a uniform distance. So it's certainly possible that when Russians fire these things, some could end up falling on their own people, which is not a desired outcome.